for joining us. We will start officially in a few minutes. I'm really happy and excited you came. You were brave with the corona, brave with the weather, brave with fighting of, the urge of sitting home with your pajama. So I really thank you. I wanted to make two announcements before we begin, because this event is live, and also we have about 2,500 people sign up on Zoom. If you have any questions, my staff, you can raise your hand. My staff member will give you a piece of paper and a pencil, and if you write a question, we'll bring it to Ohad Hemo during the presentation. Also, as appreciation for you being here tonight, at the end of the event, we're going to order cheese pizza. On your way out, if you want to take some, you're welcome. And again, thanks for coming, guys. And why is it funny? It's delicious. It's not funny. And we'll start in a minute, okay? Thank you. Is this computer connected? Erika, anybody? Alex, is the computer connected? It is? Okay, the speaker, I want to make sure. Okay. Doesn't look connected to me. He knows? אוהד, בוא. אז אתה יודע איך לחבר את זה? כן. לעשות לך בוא לחבר, כדי שזה עובד. Ladies and gentlemen, Ohad Hemo, let's hear it. Come on, in person, live, direct from the Israeli TV. Yes?
Thank you so much. Just a moment.
So we're about to start, yes?
Well, it should work. זה אפשר להתחיל?
לא, מפסיק אותך, צא מהבמה.
אוקיי.
He said, can I start? I said, no, get off. It's really fun to be back, but we still have to retrain ourselves about what we're doing. So again, thanks for being here. Okay, we're starting. Good evening. I'm Gadi Levy, Executive Director of the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center, and I'm excited to welcome you both virtually and in person. It's good to be back. The Streicker Center proudly promotes exploration and debate, reflection, social justice, tradition, and community, core values that are the glue of our people. So I invite you to join us tomorrow night to hear from Anderson Cooper about his famous family and what they tell us about American inequality. On Wednesday, the 3rd anniversary of the shooting of the Tree of Life Synagogue, we will honor the victims and reflect on how the Pittsburgh Jewish community coped in its aftermath. And on Thursday, Brett Stevens and Peter Bernhardt will debate the critical yet difficult question of the line between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Then in the coming weeks, we'll host Henry Kissinger, Katie Couric, Francine Prose, Adam Schiff, George Will, among many, many others. We are proud of the semester and hope you will join us often. Let's start. Helen Thomas, the longest-serving White House reporter, used to tell young people interested in journalism, if you want to be popular, don't go into this business. Our guest tonight is a prime example of the dangers she warned about. Reporting on the Arab street might have brought Ohad Hemo professional success and, most recently, the Sokolov Prize, the Israeli Pulitzer. But popularity, not so much. He has been stoned and clubbed by Jewish senators from the West Bank and beaten by the Turks, inflamed when he heard him speak in Hebrew. In Gaza, a man put a rifle to his head because he thought Ohad was from Hamas. And in Jerusalem, he's been denounced as a traitor. Still, as the Palestinians affairs correspondent for Israel's most watched commercial TV network, he returns day after day to reporting from the homes of suicide bombers, the alleyways of refugee camps, because he believes that his fellow Israelis need to understand the Palestinian street and its politics. Those of us in the diaspora also need such understanding, so we are honored that Ohad joins us tonight to lead us on a journey into the complexity of Gaza and the West Bank, the thinking of Fatah and Hamas leaders, and realities of the Abraham Accords, and the audacity of young Palestinians breaking through the barriers of fear. He will also take your questions. If you are online, you can submit them via the chat function. If you are in the live audience, you know what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ohad Hemo.
Thank you so much, Gadi. After this kind of words, I'm not sure that I want to continue, so have a great night. No, I'm kidding. How are you? You're great. I'm so glad, happy and honored to be here today. Thank you very much. As you know, as you've heard, my name is Ohad Hemo, the correspondent for the Channel 12 TV, the biggest, the most viewed actually TV in Israel, covering the Arab world for approximately 18 years, which is quite a long time. Some would say too long, to tell you the truth. I'll just tell, I graduated my first degree with archaeology and political science in Tel Aviv University, my second degree in the Hebrew University in Middle East Studies, and I graduated in the year of 2010. By the way, I'm sorry for my accent, so Israeli. It's kind of cliche, really, I'm sorry, but anyway, I graduated in 2010. And why do you think this is important for you? Because don't take me literally, but really, I wanted to knock on the door and to get the money back. It was so boring. The Middle East in the year of 2010 was so boring place. Stagnation, frozen, like New York in 2 months from now. Nothing has changed. Same regimes and same rulers, and everything was the same for decades. And then came, at that year, this guy from Tunisia, Mohammed Bouazizi, his name, and burned himself to death, created this earthquake that we feel its influence until today, every day, during the last decade. And what we're going to do, I just want to bring you the Middle East a little bit, the smell of the Middle East. There's a nice sentence in the children's book in Hebrew, "Hana'im shchenim be'enecha." Do you like neighbors? Do you like your neighbors? You should like, of course. Ask me the same question, I'm not sure. So I'm exporting my neighbors to you, and we'll try to understand what happens there. So there is kind of, I would say, new Middle East. And I'm talking about the last decade. Very, I would say, a Middle East on steroid. Everything is hyper, very fast, very rapid. If I look at this place, I can think that when I'm talking about rapid, it means that the wars became rapid, also the peace agreements. Take the wars, for instance. Last war in Gaza Strip, it was just a few months ago. And I call it war because there were 4,360 missiles that were launched towards Israel. This is a war. Last war in Gaza Strip, it lasted only 11 days. If I go back to the year 2014, it was a war that lasted 51 days. Today, you cannot find wars like this. And the reason for this is that the firepower of the other side, in this case Hamas in Gaza Strip, but also, of course, Hezbollah in northern Israel, in Lebanon, its firepower, it's so strong that Israel cannot allow itself that wars will last more than few days. But also peace agreements. You know, when I think, I'm not that old, but when I think of the peace agreement with Egypt, or the Palestinians, with the Jordanians, it lasted for months, sometimes for years. Today, we're talking about weeks. 4 countries, ladies and gentlemen, 4 countries signed peace agreement with Israel lately during the last year. Take the UAE, for instance. Since they these guys decided that they want to sign peace agreement with Israel until it was done on the ground in practice, it took 3.5 weeks. That's it. So fast, because everything today is so fast. And it's very interesting, you know, this peace with the UAE. I can tell you that I was with Jared Kushner on the flight, the first flight in the history from Tel Aviv to the east, the official flight, over the Saudi desert. And we got there, and I was sitting in a dinner with one of the ministers there in the UAE. And we had a very interesting conversation. He told me, you know, we are a wealthy country. Yes, I know. Definitely know. The 3 biggest funding investments are $1.3 trillion. Yeah, you are wealthy. And he told me a very interesting thing. He told me, you know, I don't want to purchase information and knowledge. I don't want to buy it. I want to produce it. This is my goal, to produce knowledge, to produce technology. I want to become Israel. And when you hear a minister, Arab minister, that says, I want to become minister, it took me a while to understand the meaning of this sentence, because this is so interesting. Because the ancient or the old Middle East, the Middle East that I know, does not want to become Israel. He wants to overcome or to defeat Israel. I can tell you in this private situation, and hello to the people in the Zoom, of course, I didn't say, I can tell you that I've got very good sources in Hamas. Okay, this is what I'm doing for living. We call it HUMINT. HUMINT is human intelligence. This is, I would say, the queen of the intelligence. The fact that you can sit in front of a guy, in this case from Hamas, but I've got a lot of sources, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Fatah, Tanzim, just name it. There's no alternative in the world but sitting in front of somebody. You look in the white of his eyes, and what I'm trying to do is not only getting information for what happens in Gaza Strip or in the West Bank or other places. What I'm trying to do is really enter here. I just wrote a book a year ago, and this was my aim, to enter here, to understand how these guys think. And I've got one source of mine, is great source. He goes with me like 15 years ago. We're going together. He's a senior in Hamas. He lives in the West Bank, in Nablus. Nablus is a city in the West Bank. And once in a while, I would say every 2-3 months, I'm getting on my car saying ciao ciao to Yonit Levy, who knows her, and go from the TV department, I'm going to his house. And I'm sitting there, 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, I'm sitting in front of Hamas senior, and I'm sucking information. And I really want to understand, how does this guy think? And we're sitting there, last time we were sitting there, and he told me, do you know Yehia Sinwar? Do you know, by the way, Yehia Sinwar? Yehia Sinwar is the head of Hamas. He's the most important guy in Hamas. He's the head of Hamas in Gaza Strip. Yes, I know this guy. I've met him while he was in the jail. By the way, he killed 23 people, 23 collaborators, or so-called collaborators, allegedly collaborators with Israel. He's a crazy killer. I've met him once. I've met him once in the prison. It was so interesting. This guy knows Hebrew, very, very good, I know. We were talking in Hebrew. And when I was talking to my source, he asked me, you know Sinwar personally? I told him, of course, I know him. And then he told me, you know, I was sitting with him in the jail, in the same cell, for years. And I can tell you that Yehia Sinwar, I remember that he used to do, for instance, push-ups on his fingers. And when we asked him, we the prisoners, asked him, why are you doing this? He said, I'm preparing myself to the destruction of Israel. This was his answer. This is the most important person in Hamas these days, for the last decade. And he told me that while they were sitting together, Sinwar studied Hebrew, or not Hebrew, but studied the Torah. And he know by heart full chapters of the Torah. And when I asked him why, what's the reason? The answer was, it's very simple. Sinwar says, I want to understand the faith of Bnei Israel. And I want to understand the faith of Bnei Israel because I want to know how to defeat them at the end of the day. So what I'm trying to do is to get the language, the original language, the Hebrew, and I study Hebrew, and then he, with religious tools, I would say, he's trying to understand how Hamas or the Arab world will defeat Israel. Because it's very interesting, I must tell you, there's something really obsessive in the Middle East about Israel. 6 million people, 6 million Jews, no resources at all, sitting in the heart of the Middle East, surrounded by 380 million Muslims. A lot of them does not like us. No sources, only capital or human capital. That's it. That's the only thing. And I can tell you that obsessively, people are trying to understand the Israeli, I would say, DNA. Secret. How does they do it? How Israel exists. Moreover, how is it so powerful, or I would say a superpower today in the Middle East? And as long as time goes on, it became much stronger. How come? They're really trying to understand it. And this is the, I would say, old Middle East that I know personally. And then I'm sitting with this guy, with this minister in the UAE, and he tells me, in other words, I don't want to defeat you. I don't want to throw you to the sea or whatever. I want to become like you. And this is interesting. It says something about the changes that the area that I'm living in having during the last decade. And there's a question I ask myself, how come, or what's the reason for instance, Bahrain or the UAE, these two countries in the Gulf, what's the reason for them to sign peace agreement with Israel? I ask myself. Because if you open the map, you see that these guys are sitting next to Iran, and this is a little bit frightening for them to do it. And if I ask you the question, or I ask myself the question, I'll give you an answer as far as I understand it. And the answer is that we have to go back 2 years ago to the night of the 14th of September 2019, Whenever someone, John Doe, we don't know who is it at the beginning, he's launching 8 cruise missiles plus 17 suicide drone aircrafts for hundreds of kilometers in the Saudi desert. He's launching them, and this ammunition hit the 2 biggest major sites for production of oil and gas of the Saudis. And Saudi Arabia lost. In this specific moment, they would say later, they lost $25 billion. Now, the Middle East wake up at the 14th of September, 2 years ago, I would say in panic, really frightened. And the reason for this is that we understand that the Iranians are behind this attack. And whoever did it to Saudi Arabia, even though it's spent, like, believe me, trillions of dollars every year for air defense, whoever did it to Saudi Arabia can do it to me, to Israel, or to the UAE, or to Bahrain, or for any country in this area. And what happens is that Bahrain, what they want is I would say, aircraft defense umbrella. And the UAE, what they want is the F-35, and the way to Washington goes through Jerusalem. So if I ask myself what changed there, this is the major reason. So there's Iran on the one hand, the Shia Iran. On the other hand, the majority of the Middle East, which is Sunni, okay? And there's a clash. It's a really big clash. And the only place today, 2021, in the Middle East, there's cooperation, whereas there's cooperation between the Sunnis and the Shias, the only place is in the Palestinian arena. Because the goal, they've got a common goal, and the goal is, of course, defeating Israel. So you can find Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which is Sunni. You can find Iran, which is Shia. Usually, they believe me, they hate each other. But here, there's a great cooperation. And you can find Hamas members that works in Iran or with Iran. And I want to tell you in this point something. I've got great sources, as I said, in Hamas. I've got great sources in Hamas, in the Islamic organization, in the West Bank and in Gaza Strip and in the prisons. But I never managed to penetrate into Hamas, which is abroad. Okay, Hamas abroad are very strong, or the guys there are very strong. I never managed to penetrate there, never. They don't want to cooperate with Israeli journalists, nothing. And they're sitting three places. They're sitting in Lebanon, they're sitting in Qatar, and they're sitting in Turkey. Today, in Istanbul, there's, I would say, boring place or boring building in Istanbul, which Hamas members are sitting there, and what they're doing is trying to export terror towards Israel 24 hours, believe me. And the intelligence, the Turkish intelligence, they know about it, and they doesn't have any problem. Now, I really managed to enter there. I couldn't never do it until I got this mail or message in my Facebook. Who wants to read it? You want? No, I'm kidding. مرحبا اسمي صهيب حسن يوسف نجل قيادي في حركة حماس I got this. I guess that you will throw it away, right? I almost fainted, believe me. Because what I got this message, let me help you and translate it. I translate it to English. Hello, my name is Suhaib Yusuf, the son of the senior of Hamas movement. I would like to announce that I want to leave Hamas and to embarrass its leaders abroad because of their corruption in the name of Allah. Unbelievable. Unbelievable, really. This guy, or his father, his name is Hassan Yusuf. Hassan Yusuf is the head of Hamas in the West Bank. He's a very short guy, very kind, I must tell you. I've been in his house for a few times. He lives next to Ramallah, in a small village next to Ramallah. And this guy, last time I've been in his house, he tried to feed me with banana. He says, don't say that Hamas is not a kind person. So please, eat banana. But I'm not kidding. But his children, they're like murderers, really. I almost said Hagomel each time that I went out of his house. And one of his children wrote me this thing, okay? And I made this, as you could see, I gave him his number, and I'm sitting in the darkness waiting for his call. And then he made this phone call, and he told me, look, until recently, until a week and a half ago, I've been in Hamas in Turkey. Now you remember, Hamas, Turkey, the strongest branch of Hamas today. Okay, it's interesting. And he told me, in Arabic, he said, Sar khilaf binatna. We had a dispute or something, and I left there. And today I'm sitting in the east, in the far east, and I want you to come, please. Would you come? What do you say? Miss, would you come? Yes, of course. Going to the Far East in order to meet the son of the senior of Hamas. I came there. I took my risk, and I bought this, the ticket. And 2 days later, I flew to the other side of the world, literally. I flew there in order to meet the son of the senior of Hamas there. And if I ask myself, how come, I think that the best tool that I use always is intuition, my stomach. I'm sitting there, I'm talking to this guy. We had like 2 calls, 10 minutes altogether. Believe me, you could tell that this guy, some would say they want to kidnap you or something. I don't know. But I took this risk, and I went there. And I met a guy which was in the intelligence of Hamas in Turkey. And he told me mind-blowing stories about what happens there. So I just want to show you a very small piece about our interaction, and then I tell you very interesting things that he didn't say to the camera. קבענו באחד המסגדים בעיר אסיאתית גדולה. איש חמאס מרמאללה ועיתונאי מתל אביב. אני לא יודע כיצד הוא נראה. יכול רק להניח שהוא דומה לאביו ולאחיו שאותם פגשתי פעמים רבות.
حماس في عندها مؤسسات أمنية وعسكرية موجودة على الأرضية التركية تحت مسميات مجتمع مدني. في عندهم مراكز أمنية وأجهزة متطورة للتنصت على أفراد وقيادات في رام الله.
حتى تليفونات إسرائيلية مثلا؟
موجود. قيادة حركة حماس تعيش في فنادق فخمة، تعيش في أبراج فندقية، أبناؤهم يدرسون في مدارس خاصة، حراسة أمنية، برك سباحة، نادي رياضي. الأسرة الواحدة تعيش في غزة ب$100 في الشهر. أنت تأكل وجبة واحدة ب$200. أنا بدي أطلب من قيادات حركة حماس إرسال أبنائهم أو أن يذهبوا شخصياً لتنفيذ هذه العمليات. لماذا لا يخرج إسماعيل هنية إلى مسيرات العودة ويلقي الحجارة؟ ماذا تستفيد حركة حماس من هذه العمليات؟ لا شيء.
This is so interesting. For the first time in the history, someone from Hamas, from inside Hamas, tells this kind of thing publicly. And we've been 48 hours together in the Far East. And he told me, the first thing that he told me was, why do you think that I reached you? And I said, maybe because I've been in your house, you know me. And he said, no, maybe this, but no. The real reason is that what I've done in Turkey was to follow you. We were sitting a group of Hamas members in Turkey, and we were following Israeli TV. And what we were making was every interesting story that have been there, we make a summary and we deliver it. And then he told me that there were like the NSO. We were listening to cell phones in Israel, seniors in Israel, Hamas members. By the way, he speaks Hebrew almost perfect. So they're sitting there in Turkey having kind of basic information on intelligence, but they do manage to do it. And he wrote, and he said, we just made this summary and deliver it. And then he told me, you know, my position or my mission was to create like information summaries about a lot of things that happens inside your society, about the split between Ashkenaz and Mizrahi, between Arab and Jews, between, you know, like subjects that usually people does not really try to understand it. And it's interesting because always they say that, I hear it in Israel always, they say, you know, we don't know nothing about the Palestinians, but they know a lot about us. They really understand it. So I can tell you they are not. The Middle East generally, and the Palestinians specifically, they don't understand us at all. Us as a people, our fears, our ancient motivation, our internal motivation, they can't understand it. Understand us. But this guy, it was the first time in my life, in my professional life, 18 years, that I meet the Palestinians that really understand me. And what he told me, that they're trying to, as I said before, to understand the Israeli DNA. So it's much more than intelligence. We try to understand you. Interesting. And then we make summary and deliver it. That's what he said. And I said, hold your horses. Where do you deliver it? And then he told me, we deliver it to the Hamas members everywhere, but also we deliver it to Iran. Because, and now I just close the circle, the only place today that there is such a cooperation in the Middle East is there. So intelligence that Hamas produce delivers to Iran, as we said, common ambitious or common goal, which is fighting Israel. I just mentioned that I wrote a book, very interesting, sorry for not being humble, but there was only one person in this book which was Israeli. All of them were Palestinians, the people that I made interviews, etc. And there was only one Israeli, and this guy, he works for the Shin Bet, okay? And he used to activate agents, Palestinian agents. And when we were sitting there, he asked me, what do you think the major motivation for the objects that we pick up? What do we looking for? And if I asked you why people do collaborate or cooperate with Israel or with any intelligence forces, what would you say? What's the main reason? Money, right? This is the main thing that you think of. No, I said money. He said, no, forget it. We're looking for something else. We're looking for the people, I would say the black sheep, the people that nobody care about them. They're small. They always have been small. The voice was never heard. No one really cares about them. And then I take him, I pick him up, and I look at him. And it's very interesting for me to know what he wants to say. And when I stood there with Suhaib, with this guy, I felt the same. Because the reason for him to speak was the fact that his father is in the jail, the Israeli jail, here for 30 years. Not always, but, once in a while he enters into the jail. Until today, 29 years in the Israeli jail. And he told me, I'm blaming Hamas. Because of these guys, I lost my father. I lost my childhood. I lost my family. Because they took advantage of him. They used him. And I want to revenge. And it was so interesting to understand what's the reason for this guy. And I'm not kidding. he used to be a senior in Hamas. What the reason for him to speak to an Israeli media, which is something that it's a big no-no, I would say. But there's a lot of other motivations, of course. One of the major ones are, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And this is very interesting. I want to take you to a situation that it reflects a lot of the things that are going on these days in the Palestinian arena. I want to take you to the year of 2006. Okay, December 2006. First serious attempt of the Palestinians to launch a rocket, Qassam rocket, these are the rockets that they use in Gaza Strip, towards Israel, but not in Gaza Strip, but in the West Bank. And this is something very dramatic, because if they manage to do it, it will paralyze Israel. That's for sure. And the guy who is responsible for this thing is that guy. His name is Ashraf Saadi, and he used to be the head of the Islamic Jihad in northern West Bank. Now, Islamic Jihad, have you heard this name? Nice guys. Comparing to Islamic Jihad, Hamas are Zionists, believe me. This is the most extreme organization in the Palestinian arena. These guys are kind of proxy of Iran. They're working with Iran, and their only aim is to destroy Israel. That's the only thing. And another thing, they never talk to Israeli media. Never. I never had a chance to talk to Islamic Jihad member. And this guy, I'm talking about December 2006, this guy climbed on a place called Refugee Camp in Jenin, northern West Bank, and trying to launch a rocket towards Afula, the city of in Israel, the city of Afula. The rocket fell after 2 meters, but it doesn't matter. He became dead man walking in this situation. A day later, I was quite younger than today. I took the chance. I had sources in Jenin, make some phone calls, and he said, okay, come and make an interview with me. And for the first time of my life, I'm going to make an interview with, he's the worst, believe me. Islamic Jihad, he was the head of the armed wing of these guys. And I went there. Cold day, wet day, frightening day. I'm entering into the refugee camp, and I'm entering into a place there, like a horror movie, really. You've seen Fauda? So this is the real Fauda, a real one. So I'm entering a place inside the camp, and there are 2 people there, like destroyed house. 2 people there. This guy and another guy who is jihadist, long beard, uniform, AK-47. He's sitting aside, very quiet. And I'm making interview with Ashraf Saadi. So interesting. He's looking in my camera, Israeli camera, and says, I got the information how to make the rockets. I got it from the internet, from Gaza Strip, etc., etc. And then he told me, I promise you that the next time I will launch and hit Afula. He didn't manage to do it. 2 months later, he was assassinated by Israel. Now I want to go with you to the time tunnel more than a decade later. While I'm sitting in my house, and then I got a phone call from unknown source. Salamu alaikum, in Arabic, alaikum salam. We start speaking, and then this guy, he speaks Hebrew, and he speaks fluent Hebrew like myself, really. And he says his name, and again, I'm almost fainted because he's one of the heads of the Islamic Jihad today in northern Israel, in northern West Bank, And he asked me, do you remember me? אתה זוכר אותי, in Hebrew. And I said, no, we never met. I mean, he is a real senior of Islamic Jihad. I don't know you. And then he told me, do you remember Ashraf Saadi? Yes. Spoiler. No, I'm kidding. Do you remember his assistant or his bodyguard? Yes. It's me. And more than a decade later, he became like high rank. And then we were talking, and he invited me to the Jenin refugee camp, which is the most dangerous place in the West Bank today. The most dangerous place. It's the only place that the IDF, whenever he enters into the West Bank, they're shooting him. Have you heard about these 6 guys that escaped from prison? Have you heard about it lately? So these guys came from here, from this place. And then he told me, I want you to come tonight to the camp. And I asked him why. And then he said, Mufaja'a, which means surprise. You like surprises? I like it. So I wanted to go there. And then he added one interesting sentence. He said, whenever you see me, and I'm going to arrange everything, whenever you see me, please, don't look at me. Don't stare at me. Don't approach me. Don't do anything that creates the understanding that there's something between us. And I asked him why. Because there's this place, for sure for Israeli, for Zionist, for Jewish, you cannot enter without few guns around you. You cannot. And I asked him why. And he told me because, in my words, I have a reputation. I'm Islamic Jihad senior. I cannot talk to you. For sure, I cannot invite you. But believe me, come and you're going to stay alive after this night. That's what he promised. It is. So I came there. At the very same night, I came there. And what we've seen, that this camp, Jenin camp, was surrounded 360 degrees by masked men with guns. And I asked, who are these? And I was told that these are the elite forces of the PA, of the Palestinian Authority. Now, I want to show you something, because what you're going to see right now is a summary, or I don't know. This is what happens today in the West Bank. It's a clash about the sovereignty. On the one hand, the PA, Palestinian Authority. On the other hand, the Islamists, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, these guys who invited me. Okay? The enemy, remember, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I'm the friend because I'm the enemy of the enemy, because the PA is what they consider as the biggest enemy. And this is clash about the DNA of the future, maybe Palestinian country. Is it going to be like Gaza, or it's going to be something different? So I want you to see a little bit of what happened in this night. شو بتعملوا هون؟
بنتفرج على المخيم.
لكن هذا مش حقيقي مبين.
مش حقيقي.
لعبة أطفال؟ وإنتوا إيش؟ شو دوركم؟
مقاومة.
המטרה העיקרית היא שליטי המחנה בפועל שמפציעים משום מקום כמו רוחות רפאים.
מה שאתם רואים זה כבר גז מדמיע שכוחות הרשות יורים לכיווננו.
הידיים של חלק מהאנשים כאן גם מטענים מאולתרים.
טוב, אפשר כבר לשמוע את הירי של כוחות הביטחון הפלסטינים שמתקרבים, נכנסים לכאן לפתח המחנה. כל הצעירים נמצאים שם, שומעים כאן ירי חי, אז אנחנו ברשותכם הולכים למצוא מחסה.
אנחנו רצים למצוא מחסה בתוך סמטאות המחנה, אלא שדווקא שם, ללא התראה מוקדמת, אנחנו מוצאים את עצמנו בלב הקרב, ודווקא בצד של חמושי המחנה, אנשי פתח, ולצידם, אנשי חמאס וג'יהאד אסלאמי.
יכולים לראות את החמושים האלו, אנשי ג'יהאד איסלאמי מאחורינו, הרשות הפלסטינית נמצאת במרחק של משהו כמו 300-400 מטר, אפשר כבר לראות ממש כניסה למצב, לירי. יש כאן ממש מלחמה אמיתית על המחנה, ברגע זה אפשר לשמוע את קולות הירי. السلام عليكم حرب حقيقي
صحيح
ايش في هسه؟
كان في معنا مهرجان مسجد الأقصى طبعا اتدخلوا هذول السلطة احنا بنعتبر من اللحظة هاي انهم هذول شركاء مع الاحتلال.
Normal day in the office, almost. It's craziness, right? I couldn't believe that I'm there. I mean, he said surprise, but I didn't know what to expect. And then, when I went out, this guy called me, the guy who invited me, he called me and asked me, please, erase, change, whatever. I don't want these guys to be known, to be identified, the identity to be known by Israel, by the PA, because they will arrest them. So you've seen that I change the voice, you've seen it? Change the voice. It didn't really help. And the day after, I got like 20 seconds of video from the bodyguard, from my bodyguard, which was Islamic Jihad member. And you've seen there that his house was demolished, was destroyed. And what happened is that the Palestinian Authority entered into his house at the night and destroyed it absolutely, because he allowed an Israeli correspondent to enter there and to take footage of what happened. And if I ask myself, what's the reason for the Islamic Jihad, which are the worst enemies of Israel, to call an Israeli, in this case, to call an Israeli correspondent and to ask me to come? So I got it when I've been there in the field. You haven't seen even one correspondent, journalist, nothing. They're all afraid to be arrested by the Palestinian Authority. And they said, okay, the only ones who are not afraid are the Israelis. So let's call them. Quite bizarre, funny. By the way, this guy who invited me, it's a funny story. Lately, I got this phone call from him. He was wanted by Israel for more than a decade and a half. And he called me and told me, listen, I didn't leave Jenin, my city in the West Bank for I don't know, 16, 17 years. I didn't leave it. And I want to breathe. I want to rest. So what I've done was to cut my beard, and I put some glasses, and I put a hat, and I went through the barrier, the fence, and I entered into Israel. And Islamic Jihad senior. And I've been there for 4 days. I've got family in some places, and I went to Haifa, and I asked him, okay, how was it? He said, the cost of living killed me. You're crazy. It's so expensive in Israel, so I came back to the West Bank. What is it? Questions, of course. Please. Thank you. Good question. Do you think then an Arab Spring is possible in Gaza? No, I don't think so, unfortunately. You know that I couldn't enter into Gaza for the last few years. Not only me, there's no Israelis in Gaza Strip. There's a black curtain there. You really don't understand what happens there. You don't know what happens there. Hamas, I think, that 2.1 million people in Gaza Strip. There was some periods of time, no electricity, no running water, unemployment of 70% of the young people. It's the worst place, believe me. And if you ask the people in Gaza Strip who's responsible for a situation, what they would say Israel, of course, they would say Hamas, they would say Egypt, and they would say the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, Mahmoud Abbas. So there's so many responsible people for this situation. And yet, you're looking for someone to understand. I mean, if Hamas is really the responsible for this, so how come we didn't see anything until today? How come that we didn't see any movement against Hamas? And believe me, the Israeli intelligence forces and Hamas are sitting and trying to feel it if we're going to see something like the Arab Spring. And we had a chance to see it 3 years ago. It was on Saturday, I remember it. It was a movement called Bidna Naish in Arabic. We want to live. I translate it. We want to live. And there were like few thousand people that went out in the streets of Gaza Strip. It started in two places, in Jabalia and in Dir el-Balach, northern Gaza Strip and southern Gaza Strip. And these guys called and they said, we just want to live. And you could see demonstrations. It started as a demonstration, it happened to be riots, real riots against Hamas, okay? And we felt, wait a minute, maybe there's something here. After 4 days, nothing. And I couldn't understand why. And then I met this guy from Gaza. They went out from Gaza. By the way, you can't talk to them. I have a great source in Gaza. I had a great source that was caught by Hamas, and they wired all our conversations. And he was detainee for 5 months, tortures, everything. And then they blamed him for getting me, an Israeli media, getting me information. And he said, no, I didn't bring him anything. I didn't get him anything. And then he listened to Wired. I mean, they brought him everything. It's unbelievable. So you can't understand what happens in Gaza. And then I met this guy that went out from Gaza Strip, and I asked him, how come is this a Bidnan Ish? How come is that movement, after 4 days of riots, it's destroyed? I mean, it's stopped. And he told me, I have a brother-in-law that was part of this movement. And in Arabic, you call it Baltagia, Knufiya, how do you say it? The gang, exactly. The gangs of Hamas, they came to the house, and they broke 2 of his arms and 2 of his legs. So now he's in the hospital. And that's what they've done to all the leaders. So I believe that you cannot find any serious movement in Gaza Strip against Hamas because they're afraid. That's so simple. Okay, what do you think would lead to peace in the Middle East? Is a two-state solution enough? Would people go far enough? One state. Ricky. Okay. I'll tell you what I think, unfortunately. I believe that separation is the most important thing. Separation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I cannot imagine one-state solution. I cannot imagine it. But I do think that what happens on the ground is that we're running towards one-state solution. I can tell you a story that happened a year ago in August 2020, whenever for 3 days the separation wall between Israel and the West Bank, it was opened in 2 places, okay? It was open widely. And we're talking about a weekend whenever 200,000 Palestinians went from the West Bank to Israel. Each one of them that wanted to enter Israel for the first time, some of them for the first time for decades, entered into Israel. I got phone calls from someone who sent a suicide bomber, for instance. He sent a suicide bomber in the beginning of the second uprising. He was sitting for 15 years in the jail. And this was the first time in his life, the first time since 20 years that he entered into Israel and called me and told me, listen, look, I'm in Tel Aviv right now, come and meet me. Each Palestinian that wanted entered into Israel. And what happened this weekend is that the green line, the border between Israel and the West Bank, was erased. Nothing. And I think that what's happening these days, I mean, whenever nobody is choosing, so we're going ahead towards one-state solution. Because if you're walking there in the West Bank, you could see that everything is like this, tight, together. You almost cannot separate. Personally, I'm not sure that this is the best thing to do. What would you say to people who say free Palestine and don't want to hear anything else? Are the two sides to this story? Free Palestine. I would say that I think that the majority of the Palestinians does not really support terror. That's what I think. And I met one or two Palestinians. They don't support terror, most of them. People who want to live like us, like normal people. But I do think that you can find, the extremists that are leading the Palestinians, of course. And the problem is that I was speaking about Hamas in purpose because I think that Hamas is the future of the Palestinian political arena. Hamas is the future. The PLO is the past. The PLO is, their influence today in the ground, in the field, is almost nothing, believe me. Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority, his people does not like him, and this is he doesn't get any support. Last polls says that 54% of the Palestinians prefer to see Hamas in charge. Only 30% prefer the PLO. So Hamas is the future, as far as I understand it. Thank you. Okay. So I say that Hamas is the future. And ladies and gentlemen, Hamas believes with the destruction of Israel. I told you what's the way Yehia Sinwar, who's the head of the Hamas, thinks. They believe with the destruction of Israel and nothing else. Why? Because this is what Allah says. You can't compare between the PLO and Hamas. You can't compare. And the reason that you can't compare is that the PLO is like a secular organization. So you can change the way you think. But Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim Brotherhood, they believe with what Allah said. And what Allah said, as they believe, is that the destruction of Israel this is the goal. You know that there was the Aliyah during the 90s. And during the 90s, a lot of Hamas members thought that the Aliyah is a great thing. The Jewish Aliyah, 1 million people, the Jews that came from Russia. And the reason for this is that in the Kitvei HaKodesh, I'm not sure if the Quran or the Hadith or wherever, that says that the great war between the Islam and the Judaism is going to be after all the Jews are going to be together. And they said, okay, that's what we see these days. The Jews are being here together in Palestine, and we just prepare for the great war whenever we're gonna demolish them. So this is Hamas. And Hamas enjoys today popularity, serious popularity in the Palestinian arena. And you've got the BDS. I've been in the flotilla, one of the flotillas to Gaza Strip after the Mavi Marmara. I've been on flotilla that took from Sweden, and I went on Greece. I went on the ship, and then we went to Gaza Strip for 4 days. I've been with 18 BDS members. Anti-Semitism, pure one. Believe me. They're not talking of one-state solution, two-state solution. Israel shouldn't be there. So simple. So this is about the question that do Israel want peace or not? Do the Palestinians? This is a tricky question. It's a minefield, I feel. I don't know. I think that the majority of the Israelis want peace. I'm not sure if I look at what happened during the last decade about the Israeli policy. I'm not sure that one could say that Israel have done everything or anything in order to get peace agreement with the Palestinians. So one would say, forget the Palestinians. Forget them. Look what happens in the Gulf countries. Look what happened in the Middle East. Morocco, Sudan, maybe yes, maybe no, after the... but Morocco, Sudan, 2 other countries, Bahrain and the UAE, maybe Saudi Arabia, fantastic. We don't need the Palestinians. That's what I said to a guy in this place. I'll show you while I'm talking. I'll show you this. Okay. This is a place called Balata Refugee Camp. Okay? And this is the released party of one of the prisoners in Balata, and this is me. I got this phone call from the prison. He invited me to come to his party because he had a message. So I came to Balata, and this is so the F word, crazy. It's so frightening. We're talking about dozens, maybe hundreds of rifles around me. The biggest refugee camp in the West Bank, and I'm surrounded by these guys. It was crazy. And then I went there, and I asked the head of these guys. I told him, in Arabic you say istifzaz, provocation. Okay, I see the rifles, I see everything. You're not interesting. You're not interesting anymore. You're the Palestinians. Look, Bahrain, the UAE, Morocco, they all signed peace agreements with Israel. The Arab world neglect you, ignore you. So maybe you are, I shouldn't be interested in these things. And then he pointed of a boy, 4-year-old boy, with no shoes that have been there in the refugee camp. And he told me, this boy is much more relevant to your life than any other prince in the UAE or in wherever, or in Saudi Arabia. Why? Because this boy can put, explosive belt, or take a AK-47 and go and make terror attack in Israel. So you have, at the first place, you have to sign peace agreement with this 4-year-old boy, and later go to sign another things. What is the Green Prince doing today? Well, remember the story that I showed you about the son of the Hamas senior? So he is the brother of the Green Prince. The Green Prince, his name is Mus'ab Yusuf, and he lives in here in the States, somewhere. You know the Green Prince, by the way? He was the biggest collaborator of the Shin Bet in the history, I think, he was collaborator from Hamas. He's the son of the senior of Hamas. And today he lives here in the States. He became Christian. Sorry? He lives in California. Yeah, I've met him, I think, two times. Quite interesting guy, I would say. Let me be, yes. Okay, the disengagement, there's a question about the disengagement of Sharon. Was it right or was it wrong? It's a personal question, I think. One would say that, 8,000 Israelis in Gaza Strip, 360 square kilometers, 2.1 million Palestinians that live there, 8,000 Israeli settlers that have been there on third of the ground. I don't know. I believe that the disengagement was a right step, if you ask me. I'm not sure if it was right the way they've done it. I'm not sure, because Israel did not do it as a part of negotiation. They just, left Gaza Strip. But at the end of the day, I think that this was an important step. And I want to end with the story, with your permission. Interesting story. I think that the biggest problem that we face is ignorance. Ignorance. And the other side has a lot of ignorance. They don't know us. And this is a problem, you know, when you look of the young generation, Palestinian young generation, people that never have been in Israel, never left, you know, the West Bank, for instance, or Gaza Strip. They don't know Israel, they don't know Israelis, and some of them did, you know, crazy terror attacks. I just think about it. I want to show you something that I've done in the prison, which is interesting.
כדי להבין את פניה של אינתיפאדת הסכינים שפרצה בהפתעה וגבעה כמעט ללא סיבה ניכרת לעין, כדאי להגיע לכאן. פה יושבים מייצגיה, ממיידי אבנים, דרך משליחי בקבוקי תבערה ועד לדוקרים. ילדים נערים מלאי להט אידיאולוגי שמסתיר בורות בכל מה שקשור לישראל. אם ההורים שלהם הכירו את ישראל, עבדו כאן, דיברו את שפתנו, ילדיהם נולדו למציאות של הפרדה מלאה. ואיתה מגיעה השנאה.
حياتك انت كنت في اسرائيل؟
لا
جوا؟
لا لا
حياتك ماشي في تل ابيب؟ شو بتعرف عني؟
بعرف انك محتل صحافي شيء
فقط لا غير؟ محتل؟
حاب اعرف ليش بسوي الاشي هذا وشب يجي يحتل اراضينا.
حياتك حكيت مع يهودي؟
لا حكيت معه
بدك؟
ولا بدي.
This guy is 15 years old and he killed an Israeli soldier by stabbing him.
انت اول يهودي يعني بحكي معاه بهي الطريقه يعني دير بالك.
شو بتفكر عن اليهود؟ عندك كراهية؟
شوف انا متعاملش مع اليهودي انه هو خلص انا لازم اقتل اليهودي، هو محتل ارضي، في يهود في اوروبا، هذا مش مستعد اطلع واسلم عليه واقعد معه واشرب انا وياه كاس شاي. بس في يهود هان محتل ارضي.
So this is the way some of the young generation think. Never met us, does not know us at all, stays behind the fence, the barrier, and you hear these voices. And I think that I would say the major sin is the fact that we don't know each other. Because my biggest enemy is this ignorance that we see here. And it's funny, you know, because there are some places that you get to know each other which you wouldn't expect. One of them is the prisons. I mean, in the prisons, in the Israeli prisons, are sitting people that have done horrible things, the worst things, believe me. But sometimes, not always, of course, not always, but sometimes, after 15 or 20 years in the Israeli jail, some, you know, whenever you read Israeli newspapers, whenever you watch Channel 12 each night, whenever you speak Hebrew, you start to speak Hebrew. So you get to know that, you know, the demonization that is said about Israel, op. Israel has a lot of, you know, great things, positive things. Some would say, I want to become like you, as we said at the beginning. And there's an interesting story that I want to end with him that I had a few years ago. I've done a report in the West Bank, in southern West Bank, next to Hebron, which is a very Islamist place. And, you know, I'm an Israeli, I'm Zionist, I'm entering into the West Bank. It's not natural anyway. And they always look at me and they always stare at me, and sometimes I'm being threatened by them. And whenever I reached there were like 5 minutes later, we're talking about 4 guys in a car that came and just stopped the car like 5 meters away from me. 5 meters. And I looked at them and they're very Islamist. It was frightening because they were, you know, staring at me and my cameraman. So we finished everything and we just left the place. And this car just followed us. And suddenly I found myself totally alone, you know, surrounded by mountains and 4 guys, Hamas members, they all Hamas members, that are behind me. And then and they just lakof. How do you say lakof? Detour me. Yeah. And they stopped the car in the middle of the road. And four of them went out and they've done like this. Stop. And I stopped. And it was frightening, believe me. And then one of them approached me and did this movement. Remember? Once? It was like this. So I opened the window. And then he says, in fluent Hebrew, he was smiling and says, Hemo is my name, my family name. Hemo, I have to do selfie with you. Selfie, that's what he wants. And whoa, I mean, I was sure that they're gonna shoot me or something. They want selfie, that's it. And I figured out that these guys were ex-prisoners. They all Hamas members, they all ex-prisoners. They just have been now in a meeting with the Shin Bet officer that makes sure that they're not going back to terror. And what do you see in the prison? Channel 12. And I don't know why they entered there, but now they don't want to hurt me, they don't want to do anything, they just want selfie. And and with this, I mean, I think that whenever you get to know people, you know your language, you know their language, you understand the DNA, the genetic code, it reduces the hatred. I had a great time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
What can I say? What an interesting conversation. We would love to host you back anytime. Those of you who are joining us virtually, thank you and good night. And to you guys, there's one more question that we got that I thought was super interesting. So can we answer that? Someone from the audience. You wear a wedding band, wedding ring. People know this. A very, very perceptive audience. What does the Israeli government or IDF or Channel 12 do to provide specific protection to you? What does your wife and 3 kids think about it? And do they get protections as well? I mean, it's not easy what you do.
No, it's not. Thank you. And my mother is a real problem. About my wife, forget it. I mean, 3 children, so, and I've got a great insurance, believe me. Life insurance is great. So sometimes my wife wants me to stay in Jenin refugee camp, believe me. And about, whenever I enter into the Palestinian territories, I mean, the only ones who can enter are journalists, only journalists. I mean, just a normal citizen cannot, Israeli citizen cannot enter there. And I have to sign, and that's what I'm doing, something called, in Hebrew, Ktav Vitur Zchuyot. It means that if something happens to me, if I'm being kidnapped or being murdered, something, the state of Israel is not responsible for me. On the ground, in practice, it's not that right. I can tell you that during my career, I got 3 phone calls from the Shin Bet officers that were yelling at me in the phone. There are a gang around that wants to kill you or wants to kidnap you, so get out of there. So I got this kind of back. I guess that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you for coming. As I promised, the pizza outside, you are not to eat it here because I'll get in trouble. So take your plate with your pizza, enjoy, and see you soon, guys. Thank you.
By the way, I didn't say, I'm sorry, I forgot, there are some books in Hebrew. It's still not translated, but who wants to buy a book? Very interesting. My book, I mean. It's out there if you want in Hebrew. Its name is Pnei HaShetach.
I'm going to buy one. באים ללובי?
כן. שנייה, אני בא אליי. ממש שנייה, אבל. כן? מה זה? לא, אני לא.
אני אוהב אותו.